Hey, I hope you're doing good. In the next some minutes I will show you why you should not trust a transaction with 0 confirmations. We will create a transaction, broadcast it, and will change the receiver of the payment before it will be added to the blockchain. So here's the scenario. We have a coffee shop, not that one, yeah, better. The owner of that shop is called Bob. Bob accepts Dogecoins as currency in his shop. Sometimes it will take 2 minutes until a transaction is confirmed in a block. Bob doesn't want his customer to wait that long, so he accepts 0 confirmation transactions because Bob thinks when a transaction is propagated in the network, it will be added to a block sometime, as long as the fee is correct. Alice is aware of the fact that Bob accepts 0 confirmation transactions, so she wants to use her knowledge to get a coffee from Bob without paying for it. Alice will create and broadcast a transaction. Bob sees that transaction, hands over the coffee to Alice, and she walks out of the store. Before the transaction is added to the blockchain, Alice overrides the transaction and sends the money to herself. Okay, here we are. I have documented all scripts so you can try to do the same attack on your computer if you want to. We are running a Dogecoin core wallet on the Testnet, and currently we have 38 Doge as balance, and we want to pay 10 Doge to Bob for the coffee. And before those transaction is picked up by a miner and added to the blockchain, we will override it using replace by fee or RBF and change the transaction and send everything back to ourselves, minus the transaction fee, of course. So just to give you a bit of background information, those 38 Doge we currently have are from the unspent transaction outputs of our wallet. So what does this mean? We have to go to help and debug window because we want to create the transaction manually. So we go to console and say list unspent. This gives a list of all transactions that we haven't spent yet. So we can still spend them for a payment, and we only have one transaction ID with 38 Doge. So we want to use this transaction and spend it. To do this, I created some templates. So we did the list unspent, but we want to create and sign the transaction. So we need the transaction ID, and we need the output number of the transaction because a transaction could have multiple outputs. Then we want to pay Bob. So this is Bob's address, and we add Bob's address here. So he get 10 Doge. And we have our own wallet address, and we want to send the rest to ourselves because that's the change. We have 38 Doge. We want to send 10 to Bob. This means we have 28 remaining Doge, but we only send 27 to ourselves. This is our change address because we have to subtract 1 Doge, which is the transaction fee. And now we can create the transaction. So this is the transaction, and we want to sign this transaction with our private key. And here we are. The transaction is signed. So we could now broadcast it. So everybody is aware of this transaction and the payment. But we want to override it before the next block is found. So this is something that is time critical. We don't want to broadcast it. It will take 2 minutes to create the next transaction. So we will prepare the second transaction and will immediately override the transaction as soon as Bob thinks his payment is safe, and will then override it. So we just save this and create the second transaction, the override transaction. So we use the same input as above, but we only send it to ourselves, to our change address. So we have 38 transaction Doge as input, and we have everything sent to ourselves, but we have 2 Doge transaction fee in this case. So this is already prepared. We have to sign it again. And here we are. And now we can broadcast the transaction. This means we use the command send raw transaction, and we will send the first transaction, the payment. And before we do this, I will open a block explorer so you can see this on the chain. Okay, a new block was found, so we start our attack. We send a transaction, the payment, to Bob, and now we wait until this block explorer is aware of that fact. Because we assume, for example, Bob is using this block explorer to see if a transaction was broadcasted. And we can see this transaction is unconfirmed, so it has 0 confirmations. Bob should now think this payment will be picked up in a block, and he can give us the coffee and we can leave. But we send now the override transaction, which will send all the money back to us. All the money minus the transaction fees, obviously. We can see this in the transaction history, where both transactions are unconfirmed, and the second transaction should become confirmed, and the first transaction should just drop out of this block explorer and only will be locked in our own core wallet. And now we just have to wait until the one transaction will be removed and the second one will be picked up by a miner. And we already can see my node removed this transaction, and we have 1 confirmation. It says 1 of 6 recommended confirmations because it is recommended to have at least 6 confirmations for big transactions. You want to have more than 1 confirmation because you could have a stale or orphan blocks. This means the blockchain will split and it still could drop out of the blockchain. This is highly theoretical, but this is possible. So to be really sure that the transaction will never drop out again, just wait for 6 transactions, but probably also very good if you just wait for 1 or for 2 confirmations. So we search for that transaction again. Oh, that was not found, much sad. Yeah, I agree. It's sad for Bob. And the second transaction, the payment to Alice, is now in the blockchain. So while I was recording this, I messed up to create a proper screenshot on the Block Explorer. Sorry for that, but I will show you how you can display the transaction even after it dropped out and you have this X on the transaction. Conflicted, yeah. So with a double click, you can't really see anything. So you can only see the fee, and we had different fees for both transactions. The override had a fee of 2 Doge. The original one, the conflicted transaction, has a fee of 1 Doge. But we can't see that we really sent this to Bob or any other details. So we still have the raw transaction. So I will try to decode this raw transaction so we can still see the transaction. You don't have to do this if you create a screenshot for your documentation, but I only had a screenshot of the header, so sorry for that again. So we have the input with our index, and we have the payment to ourselves. So this is the second one. Yes, this is the first one. Oh yeah, same transaction, same input, but we have 10 Doge sent to Bob. You can see this, JJKB is Bob. And only the change to ourselves. Yep. And this is the one that was really written to the blockchain, and this is the payment only to ourselves with a transaction fee of 2 Doge. So this is how you can still display the details of your transactions. I will also post them to the resource collection. So what we just did is create a payment, wait until Bob sees that payment, and then override it with a payment to ourselves and not to Bob. This could be a possible attack for a vendor that accepts 0 confirmation payments. So as a vendor, be aware of that fact that you could have a RBF, let's call it RBF attack. So you don't want to have that, you want to avoid that. Be aware of the fact that this is now possible. Always at least wait for 1 confirmation, change your process. So you request the payment, then brew the coffee, and usually enough time should have passed that the transaction was picked up by a block. So just be sure that you don't get tricked into a attack like this. It's very unlikely, especially for Dogecoin, because you only have a block time of 1 minute. So you have a small window where you could do this attack, but just want everybody to be safe. Be aware of the fact that this is possible. So yeah, stay safe. Don't get fooled by any bad actors, especially by Alice.